I'm Any New Province, and this week we're playing 420 Dragons Esper Familiars for Net Benefits, the series where we explore the benefits of net decking in Pauper. Esper Familiars is an archetype that goes way back. It was most popular when Cloud of Fairies was legal because it enabled a completely degenerate infinite combo. After a good amount of clamoring from the player base to get Cloud of Fairies banned and stop this deck from existing, 420 Dragon continued to grind leagues with it and find some success. This version of the deck is leaving behind the degenerate combo version of the past. It's trying to get value off of its Familiar's mana cost reduction and outgrind its opponents. I'll start by explaining the namesake card, Sunscape Familiar. It costs 1 and a white for an 0/3 with Defender that says green spells and blue spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. Getting this kind of cost reduction on a body so resilient allows us to play our card filtering spells before our opponent has a chance to respond. That way, we can draw into our different combo pieces and start going over our opponent's head with value. The combo part of this deck is a combo that's well known to the Pauper metagame. It's the Ghostly Flicker Mnemonic Wall combo. The first half is Ghostly Flicker, which costs 2 and a blue for an instant that exiles 2 target artifacts, creatures, and/or lands you control, then returns those cards to the battlefield under your control. We have tons of enter the battlefield triggers that we'd like to get multiple times, but the most important one is Mnemonic Wall, which costs 4 and a blue for an 0/4 defender, and when Mnemonic Wall enters the battlefield, you may return target instant or sorcery card from your graveyard to your hand. Once you have the cost of Ghostly Flicker down to a single blue mana using Sunscape Familiar, you can get your enter the battlefield triggers as many times as you have blue mana. First, you target your Mnemonic Wall with the Ghostly Flicker, and then you target something that you want to get another trigger out of. Last, you play super fast so that you can get through all of these crazy repetitions before your opponent manages to time you out. I'll talk about our payoff spells next. The first one is Serrated Arrows, which is 4 mana for an artifact, which Ghostly Flicker can bounce. It says Serrated Arrows enters the battlefield with 3 arrowhead counters on it. At the beginning of your upkeep, if there are no arrowhead counters on Serrated Arrows, sacrifice it, but we're going to keep flickering it and keeping those counters on it anyway. Its ability is tap, remove an arrowhead counter from Serrated Arrows, put a -1/-1 counter on target creature. So for each blue mana we have, we can bounce our Serrated Arrows and put another -1/-1 counter on a creature. Just being able to do this once in a turn can shut down things like Spell Stutter Sprite, but being able to do it a countless amount of times seems great. Next, we have Stonehorn Dignitary, which costs 3 and a white for a 1/4 Rhino Soldier. When Stonehorn Dignitary enters the battlefield, target opponent skips their next combat phase. We're okay flickering this with a full cost Ghostly Flicker so long as we can do it at least once a turn and make sure our opponent doesn't get any combat steps. We have 1 copy of Sage's Row Denizen, which is the only payoff that functionally kills our opponent somehow. It costs 2 and a blue for a 2/3, and whenever another blue creature enters the battlefield under your control, target player puts the top 2 cards of their library into their graveyard. So long as we're bouncing a blue creature with our Ghostly Flickers that only cost a single blue mana, we're going to mill our opponent out in a hurry. Finally, we have 3 copies of God Pharaoh's Faithful. For 1 white, you get an 0/4 that whenever you cast a blue, black, or red spell, you gain 1 life. I'm vocally a very big fan of incidental life gain, and God Pharaoh's Faithful doubles as that and a blocker for all of those stompy decks that seem to be running around. A big part of this deck's plan relies on getting a few concise creatures together at the right time. For that reason, we're running a ton of card filtering. Our first filter is Compulsive Research. It costs 2 and a blue for a sorcery that makes target player draw 3 cards, then discard 2 cards unless they discard a land card. You'll see when I get to the mana base that we have a lot of ways of keeping land cards in our hand to turn this card into pure card advantage. At the same time, even if we can't get pure card advantage out of it, we should be using it to dig towards a combo piece every time. Next, we have Seagate Oracle, which also helps to gum up the ground. It costs 2 and a blue for a 1/3, and when it enters the battlefield, look at the top 2 cards of your library. Put one of them into your hand and the other on the bottom of your library. Seagate Oracle is one of the best 2-for-1 creatures in the format. It comes down early, it gets in the way of those stompy creatures, and it gives you really great card selection to make sure you find those combo pieces. Finally, we have some of Pauper's most popular and powerful card filtering magic. This is Preordain, which costs 1 blue for a sorcery that lets you scry 2, then draw a card. We're also running a couple of Brainstorms, which cost 1 blue for an instant, and it lets you draw 3 cards, then put 2 cards from your hand on the top of your library in any order. This is kind of dangerous if you don't have other spells like Preordain and Seagate Oracle to put the spells you don't want on the bottom of your deck. Finally, we have our big value spells. First, we have Snap, which costs 1 and a blue. It's an instant, and it returns target creature to its owner's hand and allows you to untap 2 lands. Snap is a good value play in our deck because our mana base is made up of so many Karoo lands. We can return one of our value creatures like an Evoked Muldrifter to our hand and then put it back on the battlefield with the mana we produce by our untapped Karoos. Our last non-land card is one of my favorite commons ever printed. It's Muldrifter. It costs 4 and a blue for a flying elemental that's a 2/2. When it enters the battlefield, you draw 2 cards, but you can also evoke it for 2 and a blue, which means you can cast a spell for its evoke cost. If you do, it's sacrificed when it enters the battlefield. It should be obvious why Muldrifter is such a great card. It's card advantage, it has evasion, and it can even be a divination in the worst case. Okay, let's have a look at this mana base. First, we have 4 Azorius Chanceries, blue-white Karoo lands, which means they enter the battlefield tapped, and when they enter the battlefield, you have to return a land you control to your hand. When they become untapped, they add blue and white. We also have 2 Dimir Aqueducts. They enter the battlefield tapped. When they enter the battlefield, you return a land you control to your hand. When they become untapped, they add blue and black. It's definitely dangerous to play this many Karoos in a format where Dinrova Horror is so popular. However, being able to cast a Snap for 1 blue mana and continue comboing off with the rest of the mana you make from your Karoo lands is totally worth it. For our mana fixing, we have the full 4 Ash Barrens and 3 Evolving Wilds. These are standard Pauper fetches. You can pay 1, discard Ash Barrens and go get a basic, or you can play your Evolving Wilds, tap it, sacrifice it, and search your library for a basic land card and put it onto the battlefield tapped. For our basic lands, we have 5 snow-covered islands, which could be regular basic islands, but I think there's a little bit of showing off going on here, and 2 basic plains, only enough basic plains to hit a Sunscape Familiar on time with one of our fetch lands, and lots of untapped blue mana so that we can preordain on turn 1. Alright, let's have a look at this sideboard. First, we've got another copy of God Pharaoh's Faithful for when gaining life is important, and so is blocking. When blocking isn't that important, we have some lone missionaries that enter the battlefield and can be triggered multiple times with our ghostly flickers to gain a ton of life. We have 2 Dispels as just very efficient counter magic when we're playing something like Stompy or other decks that have instants. We have Hydroblast to shut down red decks. We have a Reaping the Graves to grind it out against other grindy decks like Monarch. We have 2 Stormbound Geists if our opponent is on Celestial Flares or Chainer's Edicts. We have another Serrated Arrows if we're playing against a deck with a ton of X1s. We've got a Capsize if we want to bounce something huge like an Elvish Vanguard or maybe an Ulamog's Crusher or something. And we have 3 Stonehorn Dignitaries because flickering these once a turn can shut down any combat-based deck. And there you have it, Esper Familiars by 420 Dragon. We're going to take this deck live into a league at twitch.tv/AnyNewProvince at 7 p.m. Atlantic time on Monday night. We're there every Monday night playing competitive PauperDecks. Before I go, I just want to remind you that you can like the video or subscribe to the channel down below. I'd seriously appreciate it. It's a great way to let me know you've enjoyed everything, and it really encourages me to keep making great Pauper content. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this deck tech, and hopefully I'll see you on Monday night.